This episode is supported in part by Sacred Wright's public scholarship on religion, gender, and sexuality through a grant from the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation. You can find Sacred Wrights online at sacred-rights.org and the Carpenter Foundation at carpenterfoundation.us. Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Deirdre Jonese Austin. Deirdre Jonese Austin is a writer, womanist minister, and black feminist anthropologist and ethnographer raised in the South and in the Protestant Church. Her work, ministry, and research develop out of her own experience and explore topics at the intersection of faith, race, gender, and sexuality, and justice. Jonese has a Master of Divinity degree from Emory University's Candler School of Theology. She is currently a PhD candidate at Duke University in Cultural Anthropology, pursuing certificates in Feminist and African American Studies. Her doctoral project explores how black women dancers in the U.S. South cultivate the sacred in their relationships with their own bodies and sexualities, the divine, and other dancers at black churches and at pole dance and fitness studios. We had a blast discussing her piece titled From the Early Church to Boots on the Ground, Dance is Worship. Please enjoy my conversation with Deirdre Jonese Austin. Deirdre Jonese Austin, welcome to Classical Ideas.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am delighted that you're here as well. I'm wondering if we can kick this off by having you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners so they know just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, so I always say that I was raised in the South and in the church, and that informs my perspective. I do a lot of work at the intersections of race, gender, sexuality, and faith. My work, my research, my ministry is focused on promoting healing, wholeness, and liberation for all people, but especially Black Christian women, especially addressing some of, I guess, the harmful messages that Black Christian women often receive in religious spaces. So things related to like purity culture, addressing topics around like bodies and sexualities. And I will say that my work is also informed by my own experience growing up in the church. I am currently a PhD student at Duke in Cultural Anthropology, pursuing certificates in Feminist Studies and African American Studies. And related to my work in research, my doctoral project explores how Black Christian women in the South cultivate the sacred in their relationships with their own bodies, the divine, and other dancers through liturgical dance and through pole dance. So also interested in dance movement and embodiment, have been involved in liturgical dance for over 20 years, basically since I was really little, and then started getting into pole dance when I started my research in 2023.
Wonderful. I'd love to know a little bit about some of your major stepping stones. I know you're interested in dance. I know you're a minister. I know you're doing your PhD, but tell me a little bit about any stories from like your youth that really stand out, setting you on this path, leading into your experiences at Emory and Duke as well. Tell me a little bit about how that pathway unfolded for you.
Yes, so I grew up in the church, was born and raised in the church, have had different experiences of the church. So grew up in a Black Baptist church, and now went back in that Black Baptist church that was always like kind of our home and our family. I've been in non-denominational, like white evangelical churches, non-denominational Black Apostolic Church, both the Black and the white evangelical church ended up being Trump supporting churches. So have the broad experience of a range of understandings and theologies. So going through all of this and trying to think through um, where is God in the world today? Where is God kind of in the injustices that we seek? And how can I address that? So that's like my foundation. But I went to Georgetown because I was interested in international politics and realized when I got there that it's not the best place for me and my giftings, but was really involved in like campus ministry at Georgetown. So like I led like a women's Bible study, and I was in the gospel choir, and I was in the liturgical dance ministry, and I was in like the leadership on the campus ministry. So thinking through like, okay, I'm not interested in international politics, but I am interested in ministry. So started understanding my call to ministry when I was at Georgetown. Ended up changing my major to culture and politics. So I was in the School of Foreign Service, but it was like a kind of create your own type of major. So I focused on the intersections of religion and social justice. And then started dipping my toe into ethnography. So decided to do my did a senior thesis on the Black church and social justice. So did ethnographic research at a local Black church to think through how they understood gender, class, and racial justice. And I guess that was sort of kind of the foundation, and then ended up going from there to Candler School of Theology at Emory to kind of continue this work. But when I was there, I was, I guess, wrestling with what the Bible says versus what I was taught. Again, especially around like bodies and sexuality. So grew up in like purity culture, where it's like you wait until marriage to have sex. Grew up thinking in terms of homosexuality, it's love the sinner, hate the sin. So being a little bit more socially conservative and then getting there and being like, oh, that's not what the Bible means when it says porneia. Or like homosexuality wasn't in the Bible until like 1946. And that's not what actually Sodom and Gomorrah is about. So having to like wrestle with this tension of this is how I was raised, but that's not necessarily what the text is saying. And then thinking through the ways that Christian texts have been used to harm people. How can I be involved in that liberation, especially around bodies and sexualities? Understanding my own like journey of finding freedom. How can I do this work around other people? I knew that dance has been a freeing space for me, so I was involved in liturgical dance there, did my master's thesis on how Black women can use liturgical dance to find healing from personal, racial, and pandemic-related trauma, and then had a friend at Candler who started doing pole dancing. And pole dancing was healing for her, especially around these religious messages around Black women's bodies and sexualities. So put liturgical dance and pole dance together, and then ended up in my PhD program where I was like, yeah, let's see what comes up. And then, oh, I forgot my key mentor, Dr. Marla Frederick. I read her book Between Sundays. I think it's Black Christian Women and Everyday Struggles of Faith in undergrad that inspired me to do the ethnographic research for my undergrad thesis. I found out she was going to Candler at the same time that I would be starting at Candler. So I was like, I'm going to take some classes with her. And then she is an anthropologist. And she actually came through my program. She came through Duke for anthropology. And she's been able to navigate these spaces of religion and anthropology. So, like, deeply informed by her work around Black Christian women as an anthropologist of religion. So, have in many ways followed in her footsteps.
I love that so much. What a great backstory. Well, I do want to chat about one of your pieces of work too that you sent over. You sent something called From the Early Church to Boots on the Ground, Dance is Worship. Tell me a little bit about the origin of this particular piece.
Yes, I say a lot of my more recent pieces or responses to things I see on social media. So I've been involved, like I said, I've been involved in like liturgical dance and in these dance spaces. But I also enjoy like line dances. So
Mm.
like whether I'm at like the family function or like a party, I will know all of the line dances. I'm gonna do the Cupid shuffle, the wobble, now the boots on the ground. So the boots on the ground line dance, I think it started going viral in like winter of 2024. So like everybody was doing it. But there was a Facebook post around someone doing it in church. And like I think it was like the pastor's anniversary and they like changed the lyrics around. And I had a cousin who was like, this isn't appropriate. Like, why are we doing this in church? So I decided to write a piece around like it's not inappropriate. In fact, we should be doing line dances in church more often. And then also reflecting on an experience in at one of my research sites is a black church where we actually ended up doing the line dance for the pastor's anniversary. And like we didn't like shake our hips and there weren't any lyrics that could be considered inappropriate. But like just thinking through these broader experiences around dance in relation to the Black church and dance in relation to like the broader Black Southern experience, where line dances and movement are a natural part of the culture.
Excellent. What inspired you to write about the relationship between dance and worship in Christian contexts?
Yes, I think it's just thinking through my own experience and how it's changed and evolved, and understanding that there's like this tension in dance and worship. And I guess being an anthropologist, it leads me to think more about like context. So it's always contextual. So people can grow up in a context where like there's no dancing in the church and dance is like considered bad and prohibited. Or you can grow up in a context where maybe you can do liturgical dance so that you can have praise and worship during the dance context. But like we won't be doing line dances or things like that. So thinking through all of these different contexts, but also rooting it within my own work and research around liberation. So how do we free our bodies? How do we free our bodies to dance through movement? And my work around liberation is rooted within like my own theology and informed about well, like Black liberation theology and womanist theology. So that is always the ethic and the lens through which I am approaching these topics.
Yeah, the line dance in church issue aspect of the article was really fascinating. Was there any? How did people react to that? Like about your work? Like, I'm curious about the reactions to the line dancing aspect.
Yes, it was well received. She's always interesting and exciting. I think it was interesting in seeing that post on Facebook because it was different than the experience at the church where we were doing the line dance, where it was like people always have their fans, and they did it because the pastor would like joke sometimes and be like, "Where your fans at?" which is one of the lyrics of the song. So it was a space where it's like, we know this is happening. We're doing the line dances outside of the church. So what does it mean to like bring this energy and to bring this celebration into a church space? And I guess in the spaces that have done it, it's been welcoming. But there's always like this pushback. I'm glad that I haven't received that pushback around that aspect of my research, which has been nice.
Excellent. Well, there's a history of dance in Christianity and like suppressing it, right? You kind of alluded to that a
Yes.
few minutes ago. Tell me a little bit more about that shift in suppression to dance being a little, maybe more, a little more accepted in some spaces.
Yes, there are these different genealogies that I think through in terms of my research. So I talk about it was when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire that dance became suppressed. And it was because they were setting up these particular types of hierarchies that in some ways were countercultural to these spaces that the early Christians created, where they could sing and dance and speak in tongues and make music and like held everything in common. So, but also thinking about dance in relation to sexuality, where it wasn't just dance that was restricted, but it was the movement of women's bodies. This is around the time where like flesh became a bad thing, and there are all these conversations around like sexual sin. I think as I was writing, I had listened to a sermon by Pastor Delman Coates, who's at a church somewhere in Virginia. But he was talking specifically about sexuality and around how, like, I don't remember which topic it was, but it was around like the same time where Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. And all sex, sexuality, anything having to do with bodies becomes a bad thing. So thinking through that time period. And then also thinking through these different time periods where Black people came to the US and they brought their dance and their movement practices from Africa. But then again, those things were sexualized and associated with sex. So they weren't allowed to do certain dances. They like adapted and danced in other places, but like dance was restricted. And then we get into the 1970s where people are intentionally bringing dance into these dance spaces. So, in my research, I do oral histories around Greater Allen Liturgical Dance Ministry at Greater Allen Cathedral, AME Cathedral in New York, because it's the oldest and the largest dance ministry that I know of. It might not be that, but just in terms of my knowledge. And their dance ministry started in the 1970s. So, but it was at that time where dance was not necessarily accepted in the church. So she talks about, I talked to Reverend Dr. Kathleen Turner, who's the leader of the dance ministry, who talks about like being invited by members to go to church spaces, and the pastors would like lock the doors and be like, you can't dance there. So, and then she helped pave the way to where dance ministries became more popularized in like the 1990s and 2000s. So this like continual conversation around pushback against dance, but people dancing anyway, but also thinking around dance in terms of broader restrictions and control and surveillance around bodies and sexualities and how people can move in religious spaces.
Excellent. I'd love to know a little bit about the Black community aspect of reclaiming dance in worship. Tell me a little bit more about how you see that.
Yes, I think it's been a tense relationship. There's all these conversations around the Black church now, and it's like the Black church has been a space of liberation, which it has, but it has also been at times a more restrictive space, specifically around dance. So, like, Black people brought their dance and movement practices. And then, as I guess pastors became more educated, like post-emancipation, some of them decided they would get rid of anything that could be considered African and like pursuit of these civil rights and these human rights. Um, if we can prove that we are like white people, then we can get like our freedom and liberation. So like there was a time period for like that. But like that was a time where it was like dance movement, even like shouting was more restricted in the church spaces. And then again, we go through this time in like the 1970s where people are incorporating dance because and it was specifically coming through, I guess, more Afro-centric churches where it's like, yeah, we are going to do African dance. But what happens when we put this within a ministry context and we create like these dance ministries? And then I talked about like 1990s, 2000s were like peak dance ministry. And then the pandemic happened, and it's like, oh, the people who were leading aren't necessarily leading anymore, or people aren't dancing, or people just aren't coming back to the church in the way that they're coming back. So, thinking broadly about what happens now, like where do we go from here? What does it look like to worship within Black religious spaces? And in my research, I am thinking about sacred spaces broadly speaking.
Mm.
So what does it mean to see like the pole dance studio as a sacred spiritual space? I'm still playing around with the term spiritual and religious, but thinking about like my work is in pole dance and fitness studios. So like the pole studio as like a church type of space where do dance whether we're in the church at the pole studio. Dance as this place where we find community. Dance as this place where we find healing. Dance as this place where we like can get to know ourselves and can get to know God in you in different ways and like revive and refresh our relationship with God. So if dance can do that, and I believe that dance can do that, that's what the research says, then what does it mean to understand these other sacred spaces as spaces that can be worshiped? Whether it's like the post studio, the church, or even like line dancing as also this space where we can encounter God and the sacred, broadly speaking, because it's I think a lot of work that is necessary now. I'm like millennial Gen Zer. I'm an older Gen Zer, so born in 1997. But especially as p millennials and Gen Zers leave these like churches and these religious institutions, they still have spirituality. They're still seeing the sacred. What does it mean to encounter the sacred today?
Yeah, I really like the unexpectedness of the pole dance aspect of your work because, that might be a tradition that has historically may have been rejected, but you're exploring that. So it's like, where do we go in the future here? So it's kind of like exploring where we can go in the future.
Yes, and I think it goes a lot around like this genealogy of Christianity and having a problem with bodies and sexualities, where there's also work around like the strip clubs and specifically around like these Christian white fundamentalist activists, where a lot of them were attacking the strip clubs because they were the spaces where women could embody a certain level of sexual freedom. But then again, these Christian white fundamentalist activists are still active today, and now they're attacking like gay marriage and they're attacking abortion and now birth control. So thinking through like there is this broader genealogy, and we don't often remember that like strip clubs were a part of this I guess a part of this political pushback from these Christian fundamentalist activists. But it is always around bodies and sexualities, and dance is also included in this conversation around bodies and sexualities.
Wonderful. So yeah, I'm curious about the Southern soul music aspect. Like, tell me about genre here and like what types of music is coming in with regards to worship, maybe resistance as well. Tell me about musical genres.
Yes, I think that was a interesting part where I didn't know about Southern soul music until I started writing the article, and then all of these things clicked for me where it was like, because if I'm going to write about like boots on the ground, the song, then I like to do like a little bit of research. So I need to know who wrote it, I need to know what the context was, I need to know how they're understanding this song and what are their intentions with this song. So doing that research and then coming upon the Southern soul music genre, which is a mix of like soul music, gospel music, R&B music, country music, pop music. What it's mixed with depends on who's defining it. But also thinking through Idle Refresh and talking about boots on the ground. He talked about Southern soul music as being a place where he really connects to. Because I don't remember which parent, but one parent was really deep into like gospel music, and his other parent was really deep into like R&B music. So he's growing up in this household where he's hearing gospel and he's hearing R&B. So being able to mix the two and like this sacred freeing, and something he talks a lot about is the importance of community in his research. So thinking through that and then thinking through like my own experience growing up where I talk about songs like Got My Whiskey and like growing up just dancing and two-stepping with like my grandma and my family members and thinking about like this is the soul music genre. And my grandma is known as one of like she is the dancer in the family,
Yeah.
but she is also very involved in church and is like leading on the choir and is like involved in like their Missionary Baptist Association and all of these other ways. And they can do the same energy that she brings to like the family reunion or the cookout and dancing is the same energy that she has when she is singing in the choir on like a Sunday morning. So thinking about like these lived experiences where we are able to bring the joy and the family and the community and the worship. And I guess that's something I've been pushing people, like wherever we go. And even in like embodying my own research. I post videos of me liturgical dancing, and I'll post videos of me pole dancing. And then last semester I took a class on dance film. So in my dance film, I was dancing in all of these different spaces. So I was dancing in the church space. I was dancing at the pole studio. I was dancing in like the library to show that whether I am at school, at church, the pole studio, or like outside in nature, I am the same person and I can embody dance and movement and worship and community and resistance in all of these ways. So it's really been like pushing people around like I guess pushing back against this idea of like respectability politics and pushing back against like this repression, specifically around like bodies and sexualities. And I think one of the things with pole dance is like you can't wear clothes when you pole dance. So it was even like a journey and a process for me where like I think the last time I wore a two-piece swimsuit was in like fifth grade.
Hmm.
So to come into the pole space and to have to be able to connect with the pole, where like I'd show up in like longer shorts and like a tank top and a sports bra. And now it's like the shorts have gotten shorter. It's just the sports bra. So even being able to like free my body just so that I can participate in this sport has been good. And then like if I can experience that, then I know that other people can experience that as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about dance ministry now as this entire field that I've never really thought about or talked about. So this is such a cool little hole to fill on the topics that I've talked about on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your interest in public scholarship in general, because you did the Sacred Rights training program. Tell me how you feel about public scholarship in general for your future in the profession.
Yes, I didn't realize until I did the Sacred Rights Fellowship and like applied that I've been doing public scholarship for a little while. I feel like it's always been like a part of me where like I see these things happening or like these injustices happening and I want to write about it. And I would often, when I was young, like write it in my journal or I'd submit it to like the local newspaper and they wouldn't accept it and it wouldn't get published. But like I wrote it. So thinking about understanding my commitment, I guess I have a complicated relationship with the academy. We will see if I end up in the academy. I am not sold on being in academic spaces because I am committed to like this public scholarship and this public writing. And I guess my first experience was in 2019. I wrote a piece on like the families of the people who are killed through like racial injustices and like how do we deal with their families and like wrote it and submitted it to Sojourners and it got published and I was like, oh, people can resonate with the things that I am thinking and the things that I am writing. So like beginning that commitment as I guess speaking certain experiences where like if there's something well, I think I wrote a blog post around like the Megan Thee Stallion trial, specifically talking about like Tory Lanez's father was a pastor, so thinking about like religion. So I'd say like if there's something I think people need to write about, but nobody's writing about it, I think I am the last resort, but I will step up and write about it. And then also thinking about what it means to like be in the academy and to be privileged to like have this education and to have this knowledge and to know that that's an experience that not everyone can be. And like personally, I think it is my responsibility to be able to share what I'm learning and to like understand that I have been freed through everything I've learned. So if I can share this knowledge, maybe it can free someone else.
Wonderful. What are some of your goals in public scholarship? What are you trying to do in maybe the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes, that is a great question. I want to continue writing like publications and articles and book reviews. I'm still like doing like my research and reading around liturgical dance. So there's a new book that recently came out around liturgical dance therapy and how it can be used with like grief and loss. So once I finish doing like, and there's a lot of like older like liturgical dance like literature from like the 80s and the 90s that I'm still like reading and engaging. But once I get that done, I want to write an explainer that goes a little bit more, I guess, academically and detailed into like this history of dance in relation to the Christian church. So I'm hoping to publish that soon. 2027, I should be done with my dissertation, and I would love to do it where there's like an academic book if I end up in academia. But I'm really focused on doing a public book. So I'd love to publish something publicly that talks about like my research on liturgical dance and pole dance and incorporates like my own journey and my own learning. So hoping to publish a lot more as like I finish. I'm in my fourth year out of 5 years, so still in like the research phase. So as I'm writing and thinking through things, hoping to publish more on the experiences of like the sacred dance and worship in the church and then beyond the church.
Excellent. Well, Deirdre Jonese Austin, what a delight to chat with you about dance ministry, your interest in anthropology, your PhD work, your backstory. I've loved chatting with you about from the early church to boots on the ground, dances, worship. Thank you so much for coming on Classical Ideas. And it's been a pleasure having you here on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to share.